You know what's fascinating, man? I've been diving deep into the Quran lately, and I got to tell you, whether you're religious or not, whether you believe any of it or not, there's some seriously profound stuff in there that'll make you think differently about life, consciousness, and what it means to be human. And look, I'm not here to convert anybody to anything. I'm just a guy who likes to explore ideas. And holy shit, there are some ideas in there that are wild. So first off, let's talk about what the Quran even is, because I think a lot of people in the West have these weird preconceived notions. The Quran, according to Islamic belief, is supposedly the direct word of God as revealed to the Prophet Muhammad over a period of about 23. Now, whether you believe that or not is totally up to you, but think about this. We're talking about a book that was memorized by thousands of people, passed down orally, and has remained essentially unchanged for over. That's pretty remarkable from a historical preservation standpoint alone. But here's what really gets me, and this is something I never really understood before I started really looking into it. The Quran isn't just a religious book. It's like a complete guide to human psychology, social organization, personal development, and even what we might call consciousness exploration. It's addressing questions that we're still grappling with today. What's the nature of reality? How should we treat each other? What's our responsibility to the environment? How do we find meaning in existence? Let's start with something that absolutely blew my mind, the concept of fitra in Islam. This is the idea that every human being is born with an inherent spiritual nature, a built-in compass that naturally points toward truth and goodness. It's like we're all born with this internal guidance system, but life experiences, social conditioning, and our own choices can either strengthen it or corrupt it. Dude, this sounds exactly like what modern psychology calls intrinsic motivation, or what some neuroscientists are discovering about our brain's default mode network. We have these innate tendencies toward cooperation, justice, and what researchers call moral intuition. The Quran was talking about this stuff 1400 years ago, before we had any scientific understanding of neurology or psychology. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The Quran says that this fitra, this natural state, is what connects us to the divine. It's not something external that you have to search for. It's something that's already within you that you need to uncover and develop. That sounds a lot like what you hear from people who've had profound psychedelic experiences or deep meditative states, doesn't it? That sense of connecting with something that was always there but was covered up by the noise of everyday consciousness. Now let's talk about the concept of tawhid, the oneness or unity of existence. This isn't just saying there's one God in some simplistic way. This is a sophisticated philosophical concept that everything in existence is interconnected, that there's an underlying unity to all of reality. Every atom, every star, every thought, every emotion, all of it is part of one massive interconnected system. This is essentially what quantum physics is telling us today, right? That at the most fundamental level, everything is connected through quantum fields and entanglement, that the observer affects the observer, that consciousness and matter aren't separate things. They're different aspects of the same underlying reality. The Quran calls this wahidiyya, the absolute unity of existence. It's like ancient mystical insight meeting cutting-edge science. And speaking of science, man, some of the stuff in the Quran about the natural world is just incredible. There are verses talking about the expansion of the universe, and it is we who built the universe with power, and indeed we are expanding it. This was written in the 7th century, but we didn't discover that the universe was expanding until Edwin Hubble in the 1920s. There are descriptions of embryological development that match what we know from modern embryo. Discussions of the water cycle, the role of mountains in stabilizing the Earth's crust, even references to what sounds like the Big Bang Theory. Now, I'm not saying this proves anything definitively. You can interpret ancient texts in lots of ways, but it's pretty remarkable that a book from 1400 years ago contains descriptions of natural phenomena that we've only recently understood scientifically. But let's get into the psychological and spiritual stuff, because that's where it gets really mind-blowing. The Quran talks about different levels of the human psyche. There's the nafs, which is like the ego or the lower self. This is the part of us that's driven by immediate desires, fear, anger, jealousy. It's what Freud might have called the id, or what Buddhists call the monkey mind. Then there's the qalb, often translated as heart, but it's really more like the seat of consciousness and wisdom. This is where intuition, empathy, and spiritual insight come from. And finally, there's the ruh, the spirit or the highest aspect of human consciousness that connects us to the divine. What's fascinating is that the Quran says we're constantly in a struggle between these different levels of ourselves. The lower self pulls us towards selfishness, instant gratification, and destructive behavior. The heart and spirit pull us toward compassion, wisdom, and connection with something greater than ourselves. This isn't just religious mumbo-jumbo. This is describing the exact internal conflicts that modern psychology recognizes. We know now that we have different brain systems that are often in conflict. The limbic system gives us immediate emotional reactions. The prefrontal cortex provides rational analysis and long-term planning, and we're discovering neural networks associated with what people call spiritual or transcendent experience. The Quran was mapping this territory centuries before we had MRI machines. And here's something that really trips me out, the concept of jihad. Now I know that word has been completely corrupted and misunderstood, but the original meaning is struggle, specifically the struggle against your own lower nature. The Prophet Muhammad called this the greater jihad, the battle against your own ego, your own negative impulses, your own tendency towards selfishness and unconsciousness. This is exactly what every serious spiritual tradition talks about, right? The Buddhists call it overcoming suffering through understanding the nature of attachment. The Stoics talked about achieving virtue through reason and self-discipline. Modern psychology calls it emotional regulation and personal growth. The Quran frames it as a sacred struggle, that working on yourself, becoming more conscious, more compassionate, more aligned with truth, that's actually a form of worship. Let's talk about prayer for a minute, because the Islamic concept of prayer is way more sophisticated than I initially realized. Muslims pray 5 times a day, but it's not just asking for stuff or reciting words. Each prayer time corresponds to a different part of the day and is supposed to help you maintain consciousness and connection throughout your daily activities. The morning prayer happens before sunrise. It's about starting your day with intention and gratitude. The midday prayer breaks up your workday and reminds you that there's more to life than just productivity. The afternoon prayer happens when energy typically starts to decline. It's like a reset button. The evening prayer is after sunset, helping you transition from day to night. And the night prayer before bed helps you reflect on the day and prepare for rest. Dude, this is basically what every productivity expert and wellness guru recommends today. Regular breaks for reflection, mindfulness practices throughout the day, starting and ending with intention. But Muslims have been doing this structured practice for 1400 years, and the physical movements of Islamic prayer, standing, bowing, prostrating, these aren't just random rituals. Each position has psychological and physiological effects. Standing with hands raised promotes openness and receptivity. Bowing cultivates humility and surrender of ego. Prostration, putting your forehead to the ground, is the ultimate expression of letting go of pride and connecting with something greater than yourself. Scientists have actually studied the effects of prostration and found that it increases blood flow to the brain, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, and can induce states similar to meditation. The rhythm of Islamic prayer naturally regulates breathing, reduces stress hormones, and promotes the kind of brainwave states associated with peace and clarity. Now let's dive into something really wild, the Quran's teachings about the nature of reality itself. There's this concept called barzakh, which refers to barriers or veils between different levels of existence. The idea is that physical reality as we normally perceive it is just one layer of a much more complex, multi-dimensional reality. This sounds a lot like what theoretical physicists are talking about with string theory in multiple dimensions, doesn't it? Or what you hear from people who've had near-death experiences or breakthrough psychedelic experiences, that there are layers of reality that we normally can't perceive, but they're always there, always accessible if you know how to shift your consciousness. The Quran talks about ghaib, the unseen realm that exists parallel to our physical world. This isn't just about supernatural stuff. It's about all the aspects of reality that exist but aren't immediately obvious to our ordinary senses. And things like electromagnetic fields, quantum phenomena, the collective unconscious, morphic fields, all the invisible forces and patterns that shape our reality but exist beyond our normal perception. And here's something that connects directly to modern consciousness research. The Quran talks about different states of consciousness as being ways of accessing different levels of reality. Dream states, meditation states, what it calls spiritual visions. These aren't just psychological phenomena, they're described as actual means of perceiving aspects of reality that are normally hidden. This matches what researchers like Rick Strassman and Robin Carhart Harris are finding, that altered states of consciousness don't just change how we feel, they seem to give us access to information and perspectives that are normally filtered out by our default mode network. The Quran suggests that our ordinary waking consciousness is just one limited way of experiencing reality, and that there are practices and states that can expand our perceptual range. Let's talk about the social and ethical teachings, because this is where the Quran gets really practical and honestly pretty radical. There's this concept called ahsan, which means excellence or perfection in worship and in dealing with others. But it's defined in this beautiful way: worship God as if you see him, and if you don't see him, know that he sees you. What this means in practical terms is that you should act with integrity and compassion, even when no one is watching, even when you won't get credit for it, even when it costs you something. This is about developing such a strong internal moral compass that you do the right thing not because of external rewards or punishments, but because it's aligned with your deepest understanding of truth and goodness. The Quran is obsessed with social justice, and I mean obsessed in the best possible way. It constantly talks about taking care of orphans, feeding the poor, protecting the vulnerable, standing up against oppression even when it's difficult or dangerous. There's this verse that says, if you save one life, it's as if you've saved all of humanity. That's not just poetic language, it's recognizing that every individual human being has infinite value and potential. And the economic teachings are fascinating. The Quran prohibits usury or exploitative interest, promotes fair trade, requires that wealth be circulated rather than hoarded, and establishes a system of obligatory charity called zakat. This isn't just about being nice to poor people, it's a sophisticated understanding that extreme wealth inequality destabilizes societies and corrupts both the wealthy and the poor. Modern economists are rediscovering a lot of these principles. We know that societies with extreme inequality have higher rates of crime, mental illness, political instability, and overall unhappiness, even among the wealthy. The Islamic economic model tries to prevent these problems by building sharing and circulation of resources into the system itself. There's also this incredible emphasis on knowledge and learning. The very first revelation in the Quran starts with reading. There are verses that say God will raise those who believe and those who have knowledge to high ranks, and the seeking of knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim. This isn't just about religious knowledge, it's about understanding the world, developing your mind, pushing the boundaries of human understanding. The Islamic Golden Age produced some of the greatest scientists, mathematicians, philosophers, and inventors in history, precisely because the Quran encouraged this attitude of curiosity and learning. Algebra, modern medicine, optics, chemistry, so many fields were advanced by Muslim scholars who saw the pursuit of knowledge as a form of worship. Now let's get into something that might surprise people: the Quran's teachings about women. I know there's a lot of controversy around this, and unfortunately some cultures have used religion to justify oppressive practices. But if you actually read what the Quran says, it's pretty revolutionary for its time, and in many ways still ahead of our time. The Quran explicitly states that men and women are equal in spiritual potential and worth. It gives women rights to own property, conduct business, seek divorce, inherit wealth, rights that women in many parts of the world didn't have until very recently. The Prophet Muhammad's wife Khadijah was a successful businesswoman who was his employer before she became his wife. His daughter Fatima is held up as one of the greatest examples of human excellence. There are verses about treating your spouse with kindness and respect, about consultation and mutual decision-making in marriage, about the importance of educating daughters as well as sons. Now, I'm not saying Islamic societies have always lived up to these ideals. No religious community perfectly follows their scriptures, but the foundational texts are much more progressive than most people realize. Let's talk about something that really connects to modern discussions about mental health and well-being: the Quran's teachings about dealing with difficulty and suffering. There's this concept called sabr, which is often translated as patience, but it's really more about resilient acceptance and wise action in the face of challenges. The idea is that life inevitably involves difficulties, losses, and pain, but these experiences aren't just random suffering. They're opportunities for growth, for developing strength and wisdom, for deepening your compassion and understanding. The Quran says with every difficulty comes ease, not after the difficulty but with it, meaning that even in our hardest moments,
There are opportunities for learning and connection if we know how to look for them. This is essentially what modern psychological approaches, like acceptance and commitment therapy and post-traumatic growth research, are discovering. That our struggles can become sources of strength and wisdom if we approach them with the right mindset. The Quran was teaching this psychological resilience 1400 years ago. There's also this beautiful concept about gratitude called shukr. It's not just saying thank you occasionally, it's a way of perceiving reality that recognizes the incredible gift of existence itself. The Quran suggests that if you could truly appreciate all the things that are going right in your life, your heartbeat, your breath, your ability to see and think and feel, you'd be in a constant state of wonder and appreciation. Neuroscientists have found that people who regularly practice gratitude have better immune systems, sleep better, have lower rates of depression and anxiety, and report higher life satisfaction. The Quran presents gratitude not just as a nice thing to do, but as a fundamental way of aligning yourself with reality and accessing joy that's always available. Now here's something that might blow your mind. The Quran's teachings about the nature of time and existence. There are verses that suggest that past, present, and future exist simultaneously from a higher perspective, that time is more like a landscape that consciousness moves through, rather than a river that carries us along. This matches what Einstein discovered with relativity, that time is relative to the observer, that simultaneous events can occur in different sequences, depending on your frame of reference. It also connects to what people report in mystical experiences, that sense of stepping outside of linear time and perceiving reality from an eternal perspective. The Quran talks about qadar, often translated as predestination, but it's really more about the idea that there's a deeper pattern or intelligence underlying the apparent randomness of existence. It's not saying that everything is predetermined and we have no free will. It's saying that there's a level of reality where our choices and their consequences are all part of a larger harmonious pattern that we can't fully perceive from our limited perspective. This sounds a lot like what systems theorists and complexity scientists are discovering, that apparently random events often follow deeper patterns, that individual choices aggregate into emergent properties that no one planned, that consciousness and choice exist within larger systems, that they simultaneously create and are created by. Let's dive into the Quran's teachings about relationships and community, because this is where it gets really practical and honestly really challenging. The concept is called ummah, usually translated as community, but it's deeper than that. It's the idea that all human beings are part of one extended family, that we're all connected and responsible for each other's well-being. This isn't just about being nice, it's about recognizing that my well-being and your well-being are actually interconnected, that we can't be truly healthy in an unhealthy society, that individual awakening and social transformation have to happen together. The Quran gives incredibly specific guidance about how to handle conflicts, how to forgive, how to balance individual rights with collective responsibility. There's this emphasis on sulh, reconciliation and peacemaking, that prioritizes healing relationships over being right or getting revenge. Modern conflict resolution research has rediscovered a lot of these principles. We know that communities with strong social bonds have better health outcomes, lower crime rates, more economic prosperity, and higher levels of happiness. The Quran was teaching these community-building principles centuries before we had social science data to back them up. There's also this concept called khilafah, often misunderstood, but it really means stewardship or responsibility. The idea is that human beings are trustees of the earth, responsible for taking care of the environment and all the creatures in it. We're not owners who can do whatever we want. We're caretakers who will be held accountable for how we've managed what's been entrusted to us.
This is basically what environmentalists are trying to get people to understand today, that we're part of an interconnected ecosystem, that we can't destroy the environment without destroying ourselves, that we have a moral responsibility to future generations to be good stewards of the planet. The Quran talks about the balance or mizan in nature, the idea that there's a delicate equilibrium that maintains life, and that human beings have the power to either support this balance or disrupt it. Sound familiar? This is exactly what climate scientists and ecologists are telling us, that human activity is disrupting natural systems in ways that threaten the stability of life on Earth. Now let's get into something that's really personal and practical, the Quran's teachings about self-development and spiritual growth. There's this concept called tazkiyah, which means purification or growth. both psychological and spiritual purification. The idea is that we all have negative patterns, limiting beliefs, destructive habits that keep us from being our best selves. Tazkiya is the process of gradually identifying and transforming these patterns, developing positive qualities like patience, courage, compassion, and wisdom. This isn't about perfection or never making mistakes. It's about becoming more conscious, more intentional, more aligned with your highest values. The Quran acknowledges that this is a lifelong process that will always be works in progress, but that the effort itself is valuable and transformative. Modern psychology calls this personal development, emotional intelligence, or character development. The methods might be different, but the goal is the same: becoming a more integrated, conscious, effective human being who contributes positively to the world. There's also this beautiful teaching about husn al-khuluq, excellence of character or beautiful behavior. The idea is that spiritual development isn't just about having profound experiences or understanding complex teachings. It's about how you treat people in everyday interactions. Are you kind to your family? Are you honest in your business dealings? Do you keep your promise? Do you help people who are struggling? The Prophet Muhammad said, "I was only sent to perfect good character." That's a pretty remarkable statement, that the whole purpose of spiritual teaching is to help people become better human beings in practical, observable ways. Let me tell you about something that really challenged my thinking: the Quran's approach to doubt and questioning. In Western culture, we often think of faith as the opposite of doubt, right? Like you either believe something or you don't, and if you have questions or uncertainties, that means your faith is weak. But the Quran actually encourages questioning and investigation. There are verses that say, "Those who believe and doubt not." But the Arabic word for doubt here, raib, doesn't mean intellectual questioning. It means the kind of anxious uncertainty that paralyzes you and prevents you from taking positive action. The Quran constantly challenges people to think, to observe, to investigate, to use their reason and logic. It criticizes people who just blindly follow tradition without understanding why. It presents arguments and evidence and invites people to consider and respond. There's this concept called ijtihad, which means independent reasoning and interpretation. The idea is that as circumstances change and our understanding grows, we need to apply the principles of the Quran to new situations in thoughtful, creative way. This isn't about changing the core teachings, but about understanding how they apply to different contexts. This is actually how Islamic civilization produced such incredible advances in science and philosophy, because the religion encouraged intellectual curiosity and creative problem solving, rather than just passive acceptance of authority. Now let's talk about something that connects to a lot of modern discussions about consciousness and reality: the Quran's teachings about dreams and vision. In Islamic understanding, dreams aren't just random neural firing or psychological processing. They're a form of communication, a way of receiving guidance and insight that's not available through ordinary waking consciousness. The Prophet Muhammad received many revelations through dreams and visions. But it's not just prophets. The Quran suggests that all human beings can receive guidance and insight through dream states if they develop the ability to understand and interpret what they're receiving. Modern research on dreaming is discovering that dreams play crucial roles in memory consolidation, creative problem solving, and emotional process. Some researchers are finding that people can actually learn to become conscious in their dreams and use dream states for healing, creativity, and personal development. The Quran talks about ru'ya, true dreams that contain actual guidance or information, and distinguishes them from regular dreams that are just psychological processing. It gives guidelines for how to tell the difference and how to properly understand and apply dream guidance. This connects to what Carl Jung discovered about the collective unconscious and archetypal symbols in dreams. The idea that dreams can give us access to wisdom and information that's not available through our ordinary thinking process. Let's dive into something that's really relevant to modern discussions about leadership and power: the Quran's teachings about authority and governance. The concept is called shura, consultation and collective decision-making. The idea is that important decisions shouldn't be made by one person in isolation, no matter how wise or well-intentioned they are. Leaders should consult with others, consider different perspectives, and make decisions that serve the common good rather than their personal interest. This is basically what modern management and leadership research recommends: distributed decision-making, diverse perspectives, servant leadership rather than authoritarian control. The Quran was teaching these principles. There's also this concept of amana, trust or responsibility. The idea is that any position of power or influence is actually a trust that's been given to you, and you'll be held accountable for how you use it. You're not ruling over people, you're serving them and responsible for their well-being. This is radically different from how power is often understood and used in human societies. Most people who get power try to use it to benefit themselves and their inner circle. The Quranic model says that power is only legitimate when it's used to serve justice and the common good. Now here's something that might surprise people: the Quran's teachings about wealth and material success. A lot of people think that spirituality requires poverty or that material success is somehow incompatible with spiritual development. But the Quran actually presents a much more balanced view. The idea is that wealth and resources are blessings that can be used for good or for harm, depending on your intention and behavior. The problem isn't having money. The problem is when money becomes your God, when you're so attached to it that you'll compromise your values to get it, or keep. The Quran talks about being zuhd, detached from material things. But detachment doesn't mean poverty, it means you're not controlled by your desire for material things. You can enjoy comfort and beauty and nice things, but you don't derive your sense of worth or security from them. There are verses about how God has made beautiful things for people to enjoy, how it's not wrong to appreciate good food, comfortable homes, attractive clothing. The key is gratitude, moderation, and using your resources in ways that benefit yourself and others. This is actually a much healthier relationship with money and material success than what you often see in either extreme materialism or extreme asceticism. It's about balance, consciousness, and using material resources as tools for creating positive impact rather than as sources of identity or security. Let's talk about something that's really relevant to modern discussions about mental health and emotional well-being. The Quran's teachings about managing negative emotions like anger, fear, jealousy, and despair. The concept is called sabr, which I mentioned before, but there's also tawakkul, trust or reliance on the ultimate goodness of existence. The idea is that even when things seem to be going wrong, even when you're facing real challenges or losses, there's a deeper level of reality where everything is ultimately working toward good. This doesn't mean being passive or not taking action to solve problems. It means having enough trust in the fundamental goodness of existence that you can stay calm and wise even in difficult situations, that you don't get overwhelmed by anxiety or despair. Modern psychology calls this emotional regulation and has found that people who can manage their emotional states effectively have better relationships, better health, more career success, and higher life satisfaction. The Quran was teaching emotional regulation techniques centuries before psychology existed as a field. There's also this concept called husn al-zan, thinking well of others or giving people the benefit of the doubt. The idea is that when someone does something that seems wrong or harmful, you should first consider whether there might be a reasonable explanation before jumping to negative conclusions. This isn't about being naive or failing to protect yourself from genuinely harmful people. It's about not poisoning your own mind and relationships with unnecessary suspicion and negativity. Research has shown that people who generally trust others and assume positive intentions have lower stress levels, better relationships, and are actually better at identifying genuinely untrustworthy people when they encounter them. Now let me tell you about something that connects to modern discussions about purpose and meaning. The Quran's teachings about what it calls hikmah, wisdom, or the ability to see the deeper patterns and purposes in life. The idea is that life isn't just a random series of events that we have to endure until we die. There's actually a deeper intelligence and purpose running through everything, and part of spiritual development is learning to perceive and align with this deeper purpose. This doesn't mean that everything that happens is good or that suffering is just an illusion. It means that even our struggles and challenges can become sources of wisdom and strength if we approach them with the right understanding. Modern research on what psychologists call post-traumatic growth has found that many people actually become stronger, wiser, and more compassionate as a result of going through difficult experiences, but only if they have frameworks for making meaning out of their struggle. The Quran provides exactly this kind of framework, ways of understanding hardship that allow it to become a source of growth rather than just damage. There's also this concept called barakah, usually translated as blessing,
but it's really about the quality of abundance and positive impact that comes from aligning with truth and goodness. When you're living in harmony with your deepest values and contributing positively to the world, there's a quality of fulfillment and effectiveness that goes beyond what you could achieve through purely personal effort. This sounds like what positive psychology researchers call flow states, or what some people describe as being in the zone, those times when you're so aligned with what you're doing that everything seems to work effortlessly and effectively. Let's dive into the Quran's teachings about death and what comes after, because this is obviously one of the biggest questions human beings face. The Islamic view is that physical death is not the end of consciousness. It's more like a transition from one state of existence to another. The concept is called akhirah, the hereafter or the continuation of existence beyond physical death. But this isn't just about reward and punishment. It's about the natural consequences of how we've developed our consciousness and character during our physical lifetime. The idea is that consciousness continues after the body dies, and the quality of that continued existence depends on the quality of consciousness we've developed. If you've cultivated love, wisdom, compassion, and connection with truth, your post-death experience will reflect that. If you've cultivated selfishness, hatred, and disconnection from truth, your experience will reflect that instead. This is actually consistent with what researchers studying near-death experiences report, that people's experiences seem to be influenced by their beliefs, values, and the quality of their relationships. But here's what's really interesting. The Quran suggests that this process of reaping what you sow isn't just about what happens after death. It's about how consciousness and character development work in general. The quality of your inner life right now is creating the quality of your experience right now. When you cultivate positive qualities like gratitude, compassion, and wisdom, you literally experience reality differently. When you're caught up in negative patterns like resentment, fear, and selfishness, you experience reality differently. The Quran is saying that this principle continues beyond physical death. Now let's talk about something that might challenge a lot of people's assumptions: the Quran's teachings about other religions and spiritual tradition. There's this concept called Ahlul Kitab, people of the book, referring specifically to Jews and Christians, but the broader principle is recognition and respect for other paths to truth. The Quran explicitly says that Jews, Christians, and those who believe in God and the last day and do good works will have their reward with God. It acknowledges that different communities have received guidance appropriate to their circumstances. There's this verse that says, "For each community we have appointed a law and a path. Had God willed, he would have made you one community, but that he may test you in what he has given you. So compete in good work. To God you will all return, and he will inform you about that wherein you differed." This is essentially saying that spiritual diversity is part of the divine plan, that different communities are supposed to have different approaches and understand, and that the real test is whether you're using your particular path to become a better person and contribute positively to the world. This is a pretty sophisticated and tolerant view, especially for the emphasis is on results. Are you becoming more compassionate, more just, more wise, more connected to truth, rather than on whether you have the correct beliefs or practice? Let me tell you about something that connects to modern discussions about innovation and creativity. The Quran's teachings about what it calls ibda, creativity and bringing new things into existence. The idea is that creativity isn't just about art or invention. It's about participating in the ongoing creation of reality. Every time you solve a problem, heal a relationship, create something beautiful, or help someone grow, you're participating in the creative force that brought the universe into existence. This gives tremendous dignity and purpose to human creativity and innovation. You're not just making stuff or solving problems, you're actually participating in the fundamental creative process of existence itself. Modern research on creativity has found that people who see their creative work as serving something larger than themselves, whether that's art, scientific discovery, social progress, or spiritual development, tend to be more innovative, more persistent, and more satisfied with their work. The Quran suggests that this sense of participating in something larger isn't just a psychological trick. It's actually an accurate perception of what creativity really is. There's also this concept called taj. The idea is that every generation needs to rediscover and reapply the fundamental principles of truth and goodness in ways that are appropriate to their particular circumstances and challenges. This isn't about changing the core principles, but about understanding how those principles apply to new situations. It requires both deep knowledge of the tradition and creative intelligence about current conditions. This is essentially what every field of knowledge requires. You need to understand the foundational principles, but you also need to be able to apply them creatively to new problems and opportunities. Now let's get into something that's really practical and relevant to how we live day to day. The Quran's teachings about time management and productivity. There's this concept called waqt, time as a precious, limited resource that should be used wisely and purposefully. The Quran has an entire chapter called alas, the time, that essentially says human beings are in loss, except for those who believe, do good works, encourage each other toward truth, and encourage each other toward patience. In other words, time is valuable, and you're wasting your life unless you're using it for things that really matter. But it's not just about being busy or productive in some superficial sense. The emphasis is on aligning your use of time with your deepest values and highest purposes. Are you spending time on things that help you grow as a person? Are you contributing positively to other people's lives? Are you learning and developing your capabilities? Modern productivity research has found that people who have clear values and purposes tend to be much more effective at managing their time and energy. They're better at saying no to distractions, they're more motivated to do difficult but important work, and they have higher levels of satisfaction and well-being. The Quran was teaching these principles of purposeful time management centuries before we had productivity apps and life coaching. There's also this concept called baraka fil waqt, blessing in time, which refers to those periods when you seem to accomplish much more than should be possible in the time available. This happens when you're deeply aligned with your purpose and working on things that really matter. Athletes call this being in the zone. Artists call it flow. But the Quran suggests it's actually a spiritual phenomenon. When you're aligned with truth and goodness, you get access to effectiveness and resources that go beyond your individual capability. Let me share something that might change how you think about learning and education. The Quran's teachings about different types of knowledge and how to acquire them. There's ilm, which refers to rational, scientific knowledge that you get through observation, study, and logical thinking. This includes everything from mathematics and physics to history and psychology. Then there's marifa, which refers to intuitive, experiential knowledge that you get through direct spiritual experience. This is the kind of knowledge that mystics and contemplatives throughout history have talked about, direct insight into the nature of reality that goes beyond what you can learn through books or lectures. And then there's hikmah, wisdom, which is the ability to apply knowledge skillfully and appropriately in real-life situations. You can have lots of information and even profound spiritual experiences, but if you can't translate that into wise action in the world, you're missing something essential. The Quran emphasizes that all three types of knowledge are important, and that they should support and enhance each other. Scientific knowledge without spiritual insight can become cold and destructive. Spiritual experience without rational thinking can become delusional and impractical. And both scientific and spiritual knowledge without wisdom can fail to create positive change in the world. Modern educational research is rediscovering the importance of this integrated approach to learning. We're finding that purely intellectual education often fails to develop character, emotional intelligence, or practical life skills. Programs that integrate cognitive learning with contemplative practices and real-world application tend to produce more well-rounded, effective, and satisfied human beings. Now let's talk about something that connects to modern discussions about technology and artificial intelligence. The Quran's teachings about knowledge and intelligence as divine attributes that human beings can participate in. The idea is that intelligence, creativity, and the ability to understand and solve problems aren't just random evolutionary accidents. They're reflections of fundamental qualities of existence itself, what the Quran calls al-Alim, the all-knowing, and al-Hakim, the wise. This suggests that when we develop our intelligence and use it to understand the world and solve problems, we're actually participating in divine qualities. We're not separate from the intelligence that created the universe. We're expressions of it. This has profound implications for how we think about artificial intelligence and technology in general. If intelligence is a fundamental feature of reality, then creating artificial intelligence isn't playing God, it's participating in the ongoing creative process of existence. But it also means we have tremendous responsibility for how we develop and use these capabilities. The Quran emphasizes that all gifts and abilities come with the obligation to use them for good, for justice, compassion, and the benefit of all creation. This provides a framework for thinking about AI ethics and technology development that goes deeper than just avoiding harm. It's about actively using our technological capabilities to create more justice, more understanding, more connection, and more flourishing for all beings. Let's dive into something that's really relevant to how we handle conflict and disagreement: the Quran's teachings about justice and fairness in human relations. The concept is called adl, often translated as justice, but it's really about balance, fairness, and giving everyone what they deserve. The Quran says, "Be just," that is closer to righteousness, and emphasizes that justice should be maintained even when it's difficult or costly. But here's what's really sophisticated about the Quranic approach to justice. It distinguishes between different types of situations that require different responses. There's causes, proportional response or retribution for serious crime. There's diya, compensation or restitution for damages. And there's afwu, forgiveness and mercy when appropriate. The idea is that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoring balance and harmony in relationships and community. Sometimes that requires consequences for harmful actions. Sometimes it requires compensation for damages. And sometimes it requires forgiveness and a fresh start. Modern conflict resolution and restorative justice approaches have rediscovered many of these principles. We're learning that purely punitive approaches to crime and conflict often don't actually create healing or prevent future problems. Approaches that focus on understanding, accountability, repair, and prevention tend to be much more effective. The Quran was teaching these sophisticated approaches to justice and conflict resolution centuries before we had professional mediation and restorative justice programs. There's also this concept called Islah, reform or positive change, which emphasizes that the goal of any intervention in conflict should be to make things better, not just to establish who's right or wrong. This means being willing to look at the underlying causes of problems, not just their surface manifestations. It means being more interested in solutions than in blame. And it means recognizing that most conflicts involve some legitimate concerns on multiple sides. Now let me tell you about something that connects to modern discussions about environmental sustainability and our relationship with nature. The Quran's teachings about what it calls tawhid filad, the unity and balance of the Earth system. The idea is that everything in the natural world is interconnected and interdependent, and that human beings have a special responsibility to understand and maintain these relations. We're not separate from nature, we're part of it, and our well-being depends on the well-being of the whole system. The Quran talks about how God has created everything in mizan, balance or proportion, and warns against disrupting these natural balance. It emphasizes that we'll be held accountable for how we've treated the earth and all the creatures on it. This is basically what environmentalists and ecologists have been trying to tell us, that we're part of interconnected systems, that disrupting these systems threatens our own survival, and that we need to transition from an exploitative relationship with nature to a sustainable and respectable one. But the Quran adds a spiritual dimension to environmental consciousness. It's not just about practical sustainability, it's about recognizing the sacred value of all creation and our responsibility as conscious beings to be good stewards of the gifts we've been given. There's this concept called HEMA, protected zones or conservation areas that should be maintained for the benefit of wildlife and ecosystem health. The Prophet Muhammad established several protected areas around Medina where hunting and logging were prohibited. This is essentially what we now call wilderness preservation and wildlife conservation, but it was established as a religious principle. Finally, let me share something that ties together everything we've been talking about: the Quran's teachings about what it calls Elan. This isn't about being perfect in some impossible way. It's about developing all aspects of your human potential: intellectual, emotional, spiritual, physical, social, and creative. It's about becoming the kind of person who contributes positively to the world while continuing to grow and learn throughout your life. The idea is that every human being has this potential for completeness and excellence, but it requires conscious effort and practice to develop. It requires balancing different aspects of development. You can't just focus on intellectual growth and ignore emotional development, or focus on spiritual practices while neglecting your responsibilities to family and community. This is essentially what modern psychology calls self-actualization, or what positive psychology calls flourishing, becoming the best version of yourself and using your capabilities in service of something meaningful and worthwhile. The Quran suggests that this kind of human development isn't just personally fulfilling, it's actually what existence is calling for from us. We're here to grow, to learn, to love, to create, to serve, and to participate in the ongoing evolution of consciousness and creation. Whether you believe the Quran is divinely revealed, or just the product of human wisdom, whether you're Muslim or not, whether you're religious at all or not, these are profound insights into the nature of human potential and how we can live more conscious, purposeful, effective, and fulfilling lives. And that's what I find so fascinating about diving deep into these ancient wisdom traditions. They're not just historical curiosities or religious doctrines, they're sophisticated psychological and spiritual technologies for human development that are as relevant today as they were centuries ago. The specific practices and beliefs might not be for everyone, but the underlying principles, consciousness, compassion, justice, wisdom, creativity, service, growth, these are universal human values that every person and every society needs to grapple with. So whether you take any of this as literal truth, or just as profound metaphor and practical guidance, I think there's something valuable here for anyone who's serious about understanding themselves, improving their life, and contributing positively to the world. And in my book, that's what really matters.